This training series is brought to you by a generous grant from Impact 100 and Autism Pensacola.
Well, welcome to our second session of learning about IEPs and all about how to work well with your child's team at school. Again, I'm Amy Lorton. I'm the consultant at Autism Pensacola for our Parent Partner Support Program and for the Parent Empowerment Program. And I also serve as a couple other roles as Executive Assistant to our CEO and President and the Office Manager. So I stay very, very busy, as we talked about. Tonight we're going to talk about effective advocacy for your child's education. And in a nutshell, that's just you being a great team partner with your school system team, and also to learn how to be organized, how to get yourself ready for a meeting, what to do during a meeting, and what to do after a meeting, and learn a little bit about what it takes to be your child's team leader. So if you'll follow along in your packet, we will get started. I have a little visual here that might resonate with you. If you've ever felt like this lady here on the left before you've had an IEP meeting or even after you've had an IEP meeting, I think I can certainly relate to this. I have felt this way before. And then what I would hope after you've gotten some training and some empowerment under your belt, that you can feel like this gentleman on the right, where he says, wow, I can't believe how well that meeting went and how prepared I was, and no more head in the hands and woe and dread, that you're looking forward to your meetings even, maybe feeling more confident, less anxiety about participating in your child's team. So that's sort of what we're going to talk about tonight, and hopefully when you leave here you will have a little more knowledge, a little more confidence, less anxiety going forward. Now, I always say to my parents and families that I'm working with that success begins with you. And we're going to talk a lot about how you can be an effective team member, what things you need to do to be a healthy participant, and success is going to begin with you. Here's our overview for the evening. We're going to talk a lot about advocacy, and I'll tell you a little bit about what that word really means. I like to use the word partner. Most people refer to the parent or the specialist that comes in to support the parent as the advocate, but I like to think of it more like a true team partnership. So you may hear me use those words interchangeably tonight, and there's a reason for that, because I want you to start thinking about you being part of this process, part of this team, being an active, positive participant in your child's education. So what we're going to do first is we're going to review and talk about what is an advocate. And then we're going to talk about your rights as a parent, your rights for your student, and getting organized, planning and preparing, what to do before the meeting, what to do during the meeting, what to do after the meeting, because there is that follow-up that needs to be done in order to be effective. Also talking about how to problem solve when that train goes off the track, how to get it back on the track, some effective tools in your toolbox. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the school's wish list, because yes, they have a wish list for you too, and you'll be surprised, I think, when we get to that, some of the things they have to share, and then some tips and advice. At the end, we'll take question and answers, and let's get going. You can follow along in your packet. There are screenshots of everything that we're going through, and if you have not already gotten your packet from the last session for the IEP checklist, some letters that you can send to your team if you need things like records, request a meeting, etc. I have some extras of this packet. See me after class, and I will get that to you. Let's talk about the IEP as sort of a review from last time. I know it's been 2 weeks. We've had spring break. We might have forgotten about all that. Come on in, Di. What is the purpose of an IEP? Now, we talked about the IEP is an individualized education program. The purpose of this individualized education program, or IEP, is to make sure that everyone, including the student, the parents, the school staff, all knows what specifics of the educational program are and how each will be implemented daily, weekly, monthly, throughout the entire course of that IEP, that duration date that's on your child's IEP. You have an opportunity to be one of the key monitors of this plan. And this is the role of an advocate. So when we talk about an advocate, that's it, to be a key participant and a monitor of your child's program. Now, the IEP is developed during an IEP meeting. We talked all about that last session, the whole 10-step process of developing an IEP, monitoring it, going back to the start where we're doing evaluations again. The people who are concerned with the student's education are to meet, discuss, and develop the IEP goals. You have the opportunity to be one of the key developers of this program, and this is also the role of an advocate. So that is what you guys are responsible for doing as far as being your child's team participant, and I would dare say your team leader, because you know your child the best. You're your child's expert. Now, effective advocates learn their rights. You being an active partner and participant in your child's education, or an advocate, you need to know your rights as a parent, as a grandparent, as a caregiver. You need to know your child's rights. There's civil rights and there's rights under IDEA. Last time we talked, I showed you the 2 books you were that you got with your course, From Emotions to Advocacy, which is a wonderful, wonderful tool from Rights Law, and All About IEPs, also from Rights Law. Then I showed you another book about special education law. It is a fairly dry read, but not as dry as reading the law itself. So I would suggest if you're interested in getting a little more in-depth than what's in those 2 books, please check that book out. Find it. It's at Barnes & Noble. Everywhere else you can look to find books online. They usually run sales at Rights Law, and I should get a kickback for every time I promote Rights Law. They're wonderful. And it's in parent-ese, not in legalese. So it's very reader-friendly when it explains each section of the law out. Now, I would say in order to learn your rights, you really have to do your homework. You have to read, 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 and read some more. And it's not fun. It's a lot of work, and it takes time. But it's well worth the effort. You will learn a lot. I would say ask questions. Ask questions of your team. Ask questions of other parents, of Autism Pensacola, whoever you can find valuable resources to talk to and ask questions. Take online trainings, which we will have this online soon. Also teleconferences. Anything you can find online to learn a little bit more that's maybe suits your schedule, suits your learning style. And then also we do have groups on Facebook that you can chat with other parents, ask questions, get some feedback. There's other Facebook pages, other connection groups, parent advocacy groups. I encourage you to really take a look and see what all is out there. There is support out there, and a lot more support than there used to be. So it's very encouraging. Don't just sit at home and be alone. Don't be an island. Go find some folks to talk to. Now, I've given you some resources here, and it's in your packet as well. I've given, in the interest of not overwhelming you terribly, I picked out some of the best. And these are 3 that I feel like are very applicable to us Florida parents. And that is, we've got the Florida Department of Education website, the direct link to the ESC department, which is the second one you see here, and it talks specifically about FERPA. And then Rights Law is the bottom one, but the top one, even though it comes straight from our government, it's very informational. It talks about IDA, breaks it down for you, gives your rights, and in simple language. So I would definitely recommend that one as well. Also, effective advocates are organized. We're going to talk a little bit about that. In your homework sheet, I gave you all of the reading that I wanted you to do, but I also gave you an assignment to buy a 3-ring binder and buy some tabs to go in there. It's a simple organizational tool for you to get each year's IEP organized. So if you brought it with you, you can use it tonight because we're going to talk a little bit about what goes in there. And if you brought the IEP, you can go ahead and start organizing as we go along. I would suggest you use this on an annual basis. Like the school year is 2013-14, you write that on the outside of your planner, your child's name, school, file that away at the end of the year, pull out a brand new organizer or binder, and start fresh with the new IEP, all the new documentation, new tabs, and that way you have year by year, hopefully in a lock cabinet or a file cabinet shelf somewhere where you can put your hand on it quickly and have it organized. And we'll talk a little bit more about specifics of that as we go along. The first thing I'm going to tell you to get organized, it's work. I'm not going to lie to you, it's work. You're going to need to roll up your sleeves and have a plan of action in mind and keep it consistent during the years that your child's in school. If you started and found something that didn't work, go back and fix it, revise it, make it simple for you, make it usable for you, but it does take some preparation, some work. And I found that preparation is the key to empowerment, to effective teams, and for your child's success. That's true in the classroom as a teacher, it's true in business as a business leader, and it's true for you as the advocate or partner for your child's education. A little preparation goes a long way. And there will be times that you will need to put your hand on a certain document or meeting notes or say, what was that in that IEP 2 years ago? And then you'll know exactly where to find it. So organization is very important. I would also encourage you to roll up your sleeves and do some work as far as understanding and learning the language. And what I mean by that is the educational speak. You will hear in your meetings a lot of terms that people don't use outside of the school. And I encourage you to learn what those are, what they mean, and how you can use them in your meeting, in your correspondence, whether that be email, talking to the teacher in the hallway, whatever, because it is pertinent, it's relevant. So get to know it. In the back of both of your books that you bought with the course, there are wonderful glossaries, which I encourage you to kind of thumb through and get familiar with some of the terms. There's also a section in one of the books, and I believe it's all about IEPs, where there's our alphabet soup page, is what I call it, where it gives all the acronyms that like PLOP and FERPA and LRE, all those things where you're like, what's that mean? OMG, you know, that should be one of them. But anyway, go look through that and get familiar with what these letters mean and how it applies to your child's plan. Then I would encourage you to compile records. If you do not have a copy of your child's permanent file, get it. I would encourage you to get it. Make a permanent file, or a archived is what I call it, binder, and then year after year you've got your yearly or academic binders. But get one that has their shot record, their enrollment paperwork, everything that would be in their permanent file, their diagnoses, whatever. And start there if you don't have it. If you do, then hole punch it, get it in there, tab it, and mark it. If you do not have it and would like to get it, there's a letter that I gave you last time in your packet that talks about that. And it's just a nice form letter. You can copy it and send it along to your school. I would also encourage you to save work samples, assessments, and also correspondence from the school. And that's 3 separate sections of your binder. So I would tab it out, label it correspondence, assessments, and work samples. Also, you want to tab for your IEP, and I usually put that first because you're referencing that usually first in your meetings. Now, when I say work samples, what I mean is your classroom work, like homework and assignments that are done in class that they get a grade on, or anything that comes back home to you that has notes written on it. Johnny did great on this, but really had trouble on this. That's information for you to help monitor his program. And you want to put that in the binder. Now, I realize you might have a stack this large. So what you might want to do is keep a separate file, like an accordion file, and by 9 weeks maybe, and label it work samples for that year. And then do it by the 9 weeks. Pull some really great random samplings, if you will, from that you think are pertinent to put in the binder. For instance, if you're having an issue with the child needing extra support in the gen ed setting to focus and stay on task, then you might want to pull the work samples that demonstrate the need or the support that's being given for that particular need. If the child is suffering in one aspect of math, let's say, multiplication facts, but they do great on word problems, then you might want to show that contrast. Pull those two work samples that demonstrate it the best and put that in your binder. Now, when we're talking about assessments, that's not just FCAT. That's tests, that's any kind of non-district, kind of a local test or end-of-course exam, anything like that that you feel like is pertinent to show academic progress. Also includes assessments such as speech and language, occupational therapy, those type of assessments, or DEA, you get the picture. So that goes in assessments, and I usually recommend that you order it from latest to oldest. So the newest is on top, and you thumb through to the oldest at the bottom of the stack. And you may want to put in sub-tabs. Okay, these are assessments that are district-wide. These are assessments that are teacher or class related. These are assessments that are school-wide. And that might further help you organize. Correspondence is important to put in there. Not just handwritten notes, but emails. Anything that you feel like is pertinent to put in the binder, especially phone calls. You might want to document those. Just jot down at the end of the call, okay, it was 4 o'clock and we talked about this, and this was the end of our call, the result of our call. Even if you don't think it's important, one day it might be. So it's a good idea to put that in there as well. And then I would also encourage you to keep your binder current. Don't just have a stack on your desk, oh, I'll get to that, I'm busy, and we all are. I get it, totally. You know, we have kids with autism and other related disabilities, so we're busy. And many of us are single parents, and we're working, and we got yada, 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 go on and on and on. But I encourage you to maybe 2 minutes a day, to figure out how you can organize and monitor your child's program. It may just be, okay, I'm going to hole punch that and just stick it in my binder, and I'll make a note on that later. But at least you know where it is at that point, and you can go back and add more detail if you have time right before you're in bed and you're dropping off and you're just, yes, I get it. I would also encourage you to keep your records current, like I said, from year to year. Don't have the 3-inch, 5-inch binder of junior's entire educational career in there. You don't want to have to lug that to the meeting. You don't have to thumb through it when you're at the meeting. It looks a little ridiculous and disorganized. Do it by year. You can just pull one off the shelf or out of your drawer and get right to what you need. Then I would encourage you for all of the older records, and maybe they're cumulative records, like you did a psycho-ed eval that was an independent evaluation back in 2007, and it goes along with all the doctor notes and therapy notes that were private. Make an archived binder of all that and tab it out that way. Say, these are the doctor records, these are the therapy records, these are whatever, the medication doses and that type of thing. So you've got your current binder, you've got your archived binder. Documentation methods. Let's talk about that for a minute. Everybody has their preference about this. I gave you on your checklist, that packet you had last time, some suggestions for how to document. That is entirely up to you. Everybody has their own organizational strategy and method. I encourage you to do what works for you and keep it consistent year to year. If you're engineer-minded, then you know about what's called the master list, and I encourage you to do that if you're engineer-minded. You've got the list in the front of your binder that tells you everything that's in there and where to find it. And if you need to reference something that's old, you have that listed there too. Oh, that's in this binder and on this tab, and that's if your mind that inclined that way. Otherwise, I would encourage you to have some sort of table or tablet or something in there to chart, list, something that you can simply check off, yes or no, put a date on there, some sort of method of keeping a record of what's in your binder, what's left to do, and what you've checked on. Keep it consistent, though, from binder to binder. Okay, that's a little bit about organization. We're going to talk some more about it. The next slide is about identifying and articulating your child's needs. Now, this is hugely important, and we talked about this last time, that you being the key team player or team member of your team, it's very, very important that you inform your child's team of what you feel your child's most important needs are, most pressing or urgent needs are, because you don't want lag time for them to figure it out. Especially if your child's new to a school, new team members. And I would encourage you to create a primer for your team. And what I mean by that, and I'm going to pass this around for you guys to look at, and y'all can thumb through it and then pass it to the next person. This is an example of a primer. A primer is basically a statement to the child's team that says, this is what my child has, what areas my child has need in, and this is what it may look like, sound like, what you may see and hear, observable behaviors, so we talked about that before, and this is how we've addressed it up to this point. This is what's worked, this is what's not worked, and give some suggestions for modifications to the classroom. If they need a wiggle cushion to concentrate, put that in the primer. And say, oh, well, in PE, they really, really needed to get redirection often. Put that in there. Or, you know, when we were focusing on math, they really had a hard time staying in their seat. They had to get up and have some movement time in the back of the room. That's great information for your team. So when I say a primer, it's a well thought out, written down list of things that your teachers can refer to, put in the IEP even. And this is a really good example of one. It has a cover letter, and then on the inside you'll see it's broken down and saying, hi, this is my child. This is the medical diagnosis my child has. This is the program diagnosis or the educational diagnosis. This is what his experience has been up to this point. This is where he is now. And this is what you may see and hear in all of these different settings. And then you'll see on the last page it gives a little blurb at the bottom that says, see attached, for more information and references on how to implement some of these strategies, which is wonderful if you have something from your private therapist or something from a previous teacher that worked well before. Please include that. Sounds like a lot of work, but it's not. If you've already got it up here, it's just getting it down on paper, and it goes a long way, especially with a new team or with a new school. So thumb through it, you'll get lots of ideas looking through it. If any of you want a copy of this, I can get you a copy of it. This one's lengthy, this one's very thorough. Excellent example. I've seen them 1 page, I've seen them 8 pages like this, you know. But whatever works for your child. If you'd like a copy, please email me. It's IEPhelp at autismpensacola, all one word, .org. IEPhelp at autismpensacola.org. And I'll be happy to provide you a digital copy of this. So that's a recommendation I have for you. Come up with some sort of list or primer. This is very formalized, but you can make it simple, just like bullet points if you want. Somehow get the information to the team. Keep it in your binder and have it ready, because guess what? Hopefully it will evolve every year with a new list or a revised list. Okay, we were working on that need. That's not so much a need now. Or look, we figured out how to motivate the student, or we figured out how to address that need. Or we're not seeing that so much now, now we're seeing this. So it's going to be a document that's in flux, just like your child is dynamically progressing. So I would encourage you to do that. And when you're making this primer, don't think in terms of services. I think sometimes we get stuck on, they need speech, they need OT. Well, why? Why do they need it? That's where you get to the heart of the need. When I say need, I mean, what are we seeing, what are we hearing that needs to be addressed to give success for that child in the classroom? So think in terms of the need, not in services. Don't focus on the disability so much either. Focus on what you see, what the ability is as well. How can you get to the point where you're seeing success in the classroom? Focus, attention, work habits increasing, socialization, all those things. And I would encourage you to document what you see as working and not working currently with their program. and also put that in the primer. And then include your child's perspective if you can. If your child is verbal or can communicate with you somehow, gosh, I really, really, really don't like how we go to the bathroom before we get on the bus. It really drives me crazy. To a kid, that's important. Those are little things, or I really wish that I could have a break between science and math. If I could just have a break, I would not have my meltdown. So listen to what your child's saying and maybe kind of slide that into the primer as well and say, I'm hearing that he needs breaks, he needs this, or he would prefer this. Maybe he'd like to go to the library instead of the computer lab to work on things. So your child can be involved as well. And I would encourage you to plan. Now, we're talking about before the IEP meeting, before you have a conference with your child's teacher, whatever we're about to have a conversation with the school team. You want to begin with the end in mind. You may have heard that saying before. It's very, very important when we're planning our child's program. What I mean by that is you need to have a good idea of how you would like to see your child progress this year, next year, the year after, and envision them at 22 when they have to leave school at 22, and that's a whole nother topic. But think long-term goals, aspirations, dreams for your child. And consider what your child would like to do as well. Maybe they want to be, an astronaut when they grow up. Maybe they want to be a researcher or a marine biologist or whatever. Kind of think with the end in mind. Do you want them to have a special diploma, a regular diploma? Do you want them to go to college? Do you want them to work? All those things are important now when they're 7, trying to plan forward. Also, have an ultimate goal in mind for your student. And what I mean is, what do you want the ultimate outcome to be? Obviously, you want them to have success at school. You want them to make progress. You want them to be socialized. But think about things like educational outcome as far as a degree choice, post-secondary choices, job, house, marriage, kids. All that matters. That's all part of your child's development and their happiness as an adult. So start thinking now with the end in mind. All right, effective advocates also prepare. And being an effective partner with your school team means you're going to walk into that meeting prepared. They are. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it, but they are. So we need to be prepared as well. And this is business. This is business. So we need to make sure you're ready to do business before you get in there, because you are the key team member. When I talk about, and it's kind of sounds silly, but with my team, we call it Team Tyler. Okay, Team Tyler's meeting, and we think it's a great thing because we're focusing on why we're there. And actually, my child is an active participant in his IEP meetings. Wasn't always, but is now. But it's important to keep this business. You leave your emotions at the door, and any attitude that goes along with that might not help you do business that day. And we'll talk a little bit more about the psychology of the meeting. But in order to prepare for the meeting, I always suggest that you do what's called a parent agenda. Some of you may have heard of that before. Some of you are hopefully doing that. And that's just a written list of what you would like to have answered or discussed or addressed somehow at the meeting. That way, when you're in the meeting and you're deer in headlights and you forgot what you're going to say or you're overwhelmed with information they're giving you, you haven't lost track of what all you were hoping to accomplish in the meeting. Have it written down. Now, when I talk about the parent agenda, there's 2 parent agendas. There's a parent agenda that you can give to the team ahead of time, which I do recommend. We want to be transparent with our team eventually. We want to be able to have a rapport with them where we trust each other, where we can come to each other with minor problems, major problems, and feel like we're heard and that we're communicating well and agreeing on things, and that we're all on the same page all along. So it's not news to me, it's not news to you when something comes up. This is what we're striving for. So I encourage you to present the agenda either by email, hand deliver, or somehow get it to them ahead of time. And let them see what your questions and concerns are, because guess what? Some of that might take some research on their part to get you the answer you need, or to coordinate that report or whatever they need to get to you to satisfy your concerns and questions at the meeting. And also, it's just nice. It's just saying, I'm an effective team member. I expect you to be an effective team member. Let's communicate well. There's a second parent agenda that I encourage you to create, and that's your own personal copy. That's the copy that has, oh yeah, make sure you do this, and telling yourself, oh, and if they say this, then don't forget to say this. It's your little cheat sheet, if you will, to address things that you want to make sure you deal with or think about in the meeting that you don't necessarily want to let them see. You get it? So you've got your copy, you're giving them their copy. I also encourage you to do a student agenda. If your student cannot attend the meeting, or even if they do, have something laid out for the team that came from your student. And I mentioned before, simple things like, I would like to have a bathroom break between these two subjects. I would like to have extra time to get to lunch because it's all the way across the school and I'm nervous about walking there. Anything small, or I really don't get along with this person in my class, can I sit over here instead? Those are things you want to put on the student agenda. Or if they have questions about their program, that goes on the student agenda. So encourage that type of participation. I would also encourage you to anticipate and have at the ready a rationale for your thoughts, feelings, recommendations, suggestions, because they're going to ask you for it. And you should ask them for theirs as well. If they come to you with a recommendation, even if you agree with it, ask for the rationale. And what I mean by that is say, why is it that you are recommending this? Tell me. Give me this is the W, asking W questions, the what, the when, the where, the how, and the why. And then you'll have your rationale. So if there's something, let's say you're asking for more speech services, for instance. Well, why are you asking for more speech services for your student? Why do you think they need more than they already have? You need to have a rationale ready. You say, well, okay, because this report from Miss So-and-so says this, and then we're seeing this in this area. You've got your documentation from your tabbed binder. You're ready. So have it at the ready when you go into the meeting. Put your thoughts and points in writing, too. Don't have it up here, because this could go... If you're in an emotional meeting, you're tired, you got a headache, gosh, this is going on for 2 hours, I need to go to the bathroom. I mean, you could be thinking about anything or nothing, and it's out the window. So have it written down. And I would also encourage you to have, and I'm going to skip down to the last one, have a plan B. You've got your proposal, if you will, and your rationale, and you've laid it out. What if they shoot it down? Then what? You got nothing. Have a plan B. Have a proposal B. And say, okay, well, that's great, but maybe we could think about doing this since you don't agree with that proposal. And have something else in there if you're really feeling strongly about getting something for your child in place. Come up with something that you think they might agree on. And have a rationale ready for that, too. Then I would say you need to make sure that you've consulted your calendar prior to the meeting and have some dates at the ready, because you might have to reconvene your meeting, adjourn and reconvene. If the meeting's going long, you just feel like things aren't going well and you're not going to get any traction with the team, whatever the reason, have some dates ready so that you can plan to meet again. And I would suggest have lots of dates to give them lots of times, because you don't want them to say, oh, well, you've given me 2 dates and neither one of those work for us. So give them a lot. Also, you want to have them ready in case you need to do a reevaluation meeting, if you need to meet back for whatever other reason other than having to reconvene the meeting. That's just good preparation and planning. Now, during the meeting, let's talk about what to do during the meeting. I told you this is about business. You're doing the business of taking care and monitoring your child's program. Think about it like business. Obviously, this is your child. You're emotionally invested in your child. You care very, very much about what's going on in the meeting, going on in the classroom. But you come in there, you've got your agenda, you've got your rationale, you've got your proposals, you're prepared, your paperwork's there. Hide the anxiety, Get rid of the attitude, leave the emotions at the door. We're doing business. Think about it this way. I'm coming into the meeting to do what? Ask yourself that question. What do I want the outcome of this meeting to be? Okay? Then that will help guide you with your emotions when you walk in there. I would also encourage you to deal in facts and not feelings. I feel. Well, what we saw, what we heard, what we've documented. Think about it that way. Of course, we've got our feelings and our beliefs and our thoughts, but we need to deal with what we can measure, what we can document. You can share some feelings in the meeting, but make sure it's to support what you're trying to accomplish in the meeting, not to hinder it. And it's hard, I get it. And I would say remove any unnecessary emotion from the meeting. Just leave it at the door. And the most important thing is just to breathe. Just breathe. Just try to be calm, taking breaths, speak slowly if that helps. Just try to chill as much as you can. You'll get through it. I would encourage you also, as far as behavior during the meeting, dress appropriately. If you're there to do business, don't come in your sweatpants. That's a different kind of business. That's the gym. And I encourage you to also behave in a business-like manner. This is a business-type meeting. So behave like you're there to not waste anybody's time. You're there to talk your child's program. You're there to do business. Now, I get a lot of questions about this dressing appropriately from parents. And my best advice to you is to dress like the administrator of your school. Now, if the administrator at your school wears a three-piece suit and tie, you may want to tone it down just a little bit. But if they're wearing track pants and tennis shoes, you may want to kind of go a little bit more dressy than that. Teachers generally have to dress for comfort, movement, that type of thing. So I tend to encourage you to dress like the administrator. That you'll be taken more seriously if you're dressed to do business. I would encourage you also to have your materials organized and ready. Have your binder with you. And have it in a bag where you can pull it out where all the papers aren't flying out. And your sippy cup from your other kid and whatever is coming out the bag. Make it look like when you are ready to put whatever it is you're working on the table, that's all that comes out, and there I am, I'm ready. Look professional, have it all organized and at the ready to pull out. I would encourage you to participate in writing of the goals. This is where a lot of parents just get that glazed over look and go, whatever you say, and I don't know what you're talking about. Be an active participant. You will hear some things that may sound like your child, then you might hear some things that don't sound like your child. And that's when you speak up and say, can you tell me how that goal is relevant to my child's current functional level? And then you might get some answers about that and help craft a goal that really resembles your child's needs. I would encourage you to also participate in the writing of the accommodations and modifications. That's very important. And those are the things like we talked about, the wiggle cushion, allowing for movement in the classroom, small group setting, directions repeated, extended time. That's all accommodations, modifications. And consider if the goals and objectives are appropriate for your child's individual needs. You will know. Hopefully your team knows too by this point, but you will know. And if you feel like something's missing, speak up. And I know we have these IEPs, what they call IEP Online, where they're putting it on the screen and they're doing the drop-down menus and they're clicking on things that pre-exist on the list. I can tell you, more often than not, I'm asking them to do the customized box. We're adding things that are not on the list because my child's not on the list. My child has individual needs, and so does yours. So if you think of something that you think would really be helpful in your child's educational environment, by all means speak up and say, can we also consider adding, and I'll caution you on this because once they add it in there, there's something funny about both counties have this online program. If you don't click save up at the left-hand corner, as soon as you do a customized entry, it will not save. It won't show up on your printed draft. So make sure you say, oh, and did we remember to save that? Just a little tip there. Also, I would encourage you to keep always at the forefront of your mind, I am my child's expert. I am the team leader for my child. Sometimes you'll hear the term the school-based team, the parent-based team. It's really your child's team. And you know your child the best. You are the team leader in that respect. You're not necessarily running the meeting, but you are monitoring the program. And you are responsible for that, ultimately. The law states that the school's responsible for that, but we must take an active part in monitoring our child's program. Now, we're still talking about what's going on during the IEP meeting, and I was telling you earlier you need to speak up when you see something that needs to be added. I also encourage you to speak up when you don't understand something. We talked about you need to learn language of the education speak, the alphabet soup, if you will. If you don't know what they're talking about, say so. It's not going to embarrass you. And they'll say, oh, well, that means this. What is a scaled score? What is a raw score? What is this FCAT 2.0? Ask the questions. You'll get the answers. And then now you know. So be diligent about speaking up when you don't know something. And if you need something repeated, like you didn't quite hear that, or you're not sure you heard it right, or you're taking notes and you want something repeated or clarified, by all means speak up and ask. And then if you agree or disagree with a recommendation that the school gives you or their rationale, definitely speak up. It's okay to agree. In your IEP meeting, I hear that a lot. I don't want to say I agree with them because what if I change my mind later? Well, it doesn't hurt to say you agree with them. That goes a long way for building some team morale and getting some traction on some plans. But definitely speak up if you disagree. Definitely. And be prepared to ask lots of questions. This is how you pick apart a rationale. When they say, oh, well, this is our recommendation, and you just, ooh, whoa, no. You say, well, okay, maybe you can explain to me your rationale for that recommendation, please. And then they'll give you their rationale, and then you start asking the questions. Why? When will this take place? Who's going to deliver the services? What was your measurement that you used to determine that, etc.? I'm just randomly throwing out some questions, but you're kind of getting the idea, where they have to discuss with you how they came to that decision. And oftentimes I've found if it's not something that is appropriate for the child, because you're asking these questions and now we're discussing it, it starts becoming obvious it's not appropriate for the child. And now we're having more of a meeting of minds on that. So it's important that you actively participate in saying, I don't agree with it, let's talk about it. Also, I would encourage you to speak up if you think the team needs to be aware of something or to add something. And that could be in the notes, it could be part of your child's IEP, whatever it is, and say, oh, well, didn't we talk about that? Do you think that should be added? Or we need to change something? Or you need to be aware that my private therapist said this, or we were in the hallway talking with music teacher and they said this would be great to try. Those are the kind of things that you need to make sure you share with the team. Also, I encourage this very heavily. Be an active listener. And you've probably heard that term before, but what I mean by that is you're taking notes. Is you're asking questions when you've heard something, that you're acknowledging you're listening to people, non-verbally acknowledging. And then also, if you would like, you can audio record the meeting. Remember, we talked about that. You have a right to do that. You can write down the action items that they'll say, oh, well, Miss Smith is going to be taking data on juniors' social goals. And then they're going to report back to you. That's called an action item. If someone in the meeting says, I will do this, that's an action item. Write it down, and then I encourage you to follow up on that. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so that's partly why you're taking notes, because you're wanting to see what are we actively deciding on in this meeting. Who is responsible for it? When is it going to take place? Those are action items. If you've been in a business meeting, you know how this works. Again, we're here to do business. Also, you want to repeat back to the person that says something if you are coming to a decision. What I think I heard you say was blah, blah, blah. and then get confirmation from that person. Another thing you might want to keep in mind when you are recording a meeting is that sometimes the communication in the room is nonverbal. We say, okay, do we agree that this is going to be discussed, or we're going to decide to do this? And everybody's doing this or this. That's not getting on the audio recording. So you can say, okay, I see that we're all in agreement because we're all shaking our heads yes, or whatever. Make sure you're augmenting what's happening for the tape purposes. And then I would encourage you, again, ask the W questions. And when I say W, we were talking about the why, when, who, what, especially when we're talking services and who's responsible for those services. And then we're going to get to what we do after the meeting. All that took place in the meeting. And the most important thing, again, is to remember to be an active participant in the meeting. You're going to need to do some follow-up after the meeting in order to make sure that what happened in the meeting goes according to plan. You're going to need to read and review the IEP. Remember we talked about you are not obligated to sign your IEP at the meeting. They'll tell you, you got to sign this. Well, yeah, you got to sign it eventually if you want to give your consent for the IEP to be implemented, because it starts the date that you sign. Now, if you wait 30 days, they can implement it without you because they have that obligation we talked about before to educate your child under the law. So you don't want to wait too long. Remember we talked about within 2 days you want to have it reviewed, come back to them with any suggestions or revisions that need to be made, or come back to them with it signed and say, this was great, I'm ready to sign this. But you do not have to sign it at the meeting. And understand that our 2 counties are going to one form now, I hear. So for the participation page and the consent page are now merging to one. So be aware of that. Now, you want to review it. Make sure that everything you discussed in the meeting is in there, and anything that was a carryover from the old IEP is still pertinent, and that there's no typos, there's no omissions, there's dates are right, names are right, etc. And services. And you want to revisit your parent and student agenda. Compare the two. Okay, this is what we were seeking to accomplish from the parent and student side, and this is the end result. Are we missing anything here? How does this line up? And then you want to sign the IEP or reconvene the meeting or do an amendment or just meet with the ESC teacher or liaison and discuss any changes or questions you might have. And we've talked about that before, so I won't get into that too much. But you have that right. Now, the next thing you want to do after your meeting is over is do some communication with your team. And I always encourage families to do a thank you note. Either email, a written note, or letter. And I encourage you to do email. That's how most people communicate now. It's very timely. You've got a documented record of it being sent, all that. But make a very brief thank you note to all the team members and say, thank you for meeting with me today and taking the time to discuss Junior's education program, and I appreciate your participation. And leave it at that. If you want to get gushy and talk more and more in detail about that, that's great. Even if you had an off-the-rails awful meeting, you thank them for their time. You thank them for their input. You're not saying you agree with it or that you thought the meeting went great, but you're showing gratitude. We should always show gratitude in our lives anyway. But it shows that you are following up, you're monitoring, you care about what's going on in the meetings, and you're going to kind of take charge about that. Now, I also encourage you to include in that email any action items that were discussed at the meeting. And say, I'm just following up to say that we discussed this and just as a reminder. And you just bullet point it. Okay? SLP is going to do this. The OT said they're going to do this. The ESC teacher said they're going to do this. And here's the timeline. Okay? And I'm going to do this. Sometimes you're on that action item list. I'm going to provide you this, or I'm going to do this. So make sure you do that, even if the meeting went poorly. It goes a long way. Then I would encourage you to initiate, if you haven't already done this with your team, what I call RRP. And that stands for regular, relevant, and positive communication with your school team. Don't just let that be the last time they hear from you before you do your next annual review. Follow up on those action items and make it positive. Thank you for taking care of that. I see that that was done and appreciate your time, and we're hoping to get great results from that. Or just say, hey, how's it going? And you have a specific question for a teacher or the EC liaison or whoever you're talking to. Make sure you're opening up an avenue for them to come back and talk to you about things. And make it relevant, though. What I mean is, don't call or email or write a note and says, how was his day yesterday? Oh, well, that's a very broad question. What do you really want to know? Do you want to know if he was able to open his snack packages at lunch that day with success, without help? Do you want to know if he got along with the children on the playground? Do you want to know if he transitioned from classroom to classroom well without the use of the aid that day? What do you want to know? Don't just give a blanket question. You'll get a blanket answer. Oh, he did well. He got all smiley faces or whatever. Or not a good day. Well, what does that mean? You want to make it relevant. Ask specific questions too. And if you've got a daily communication log and you're getting very general answers on it, start asking for specifics. Maybe just one thing. Don't overwhelm them with lots of specifics, but maybe one thing a day if you're wanting to know progress on certain things. And the teacher will respond, hopefully. All right, now, we're still talking about after the meeting, what to do. Because you've got work to do in order to effectively monitor the program. You want to document the events of the meeting, and this is why it's important for you to have a documentation method that's consistent. Again, it could be a table, a checklist, some sort of, piece of paper that you can write down. We had a meeting on this date. These were the attendees. This was the outcome. Something simple like that. It could be you're using forms, you're taking minutes, you've got a checklist, some sort of method. That way you don't have to remember, now what did we do in that October meeting? I can't quite recall. Well, jot it down. Simple, simple, simple. If you are one of those people that want to make it very long and drawn out, knock yourself out. But at least get something down on paper. Again, try not to spend more than 2 minutes a day. 2 minutes a day, that's not long. You want to record the action items, of course, on this documentation method because you will need to use that to monitor the plan. If they said, we're going to get a BCBA in there to do a functional behavior assessment and we'll have them in there observing in the classroom, report back to you in 30 days. Guess what should be on your calendar? That 30-day mark, and say, check in with whoever said they were going to do that and make sure it was done. And if not, you're reminding them, we got to get this done. We talked about this in our meeting. Let's see about getting that rolling. Then I want to encourage you to please organize your documents received at the meeting. You may get a stack. You may get nothing. You're going to get probably something, though. And then I would encourage you to look through it, organize it into those stacks. Correspondence, assessments, and whatever else, work samples, and then, or district letters. You get that letter now, that's the new law that says you weren't prohibited from making your own decisions, you didn't prohibit them, that kind of thing. That can go in another tab. Perfunctory paperwork is what I'll call that. So make sure you got your 3 stacks. When you get time, hole punch them and put them in. But how long does that take to just organize some stacks? Then I encourage you to create a new binder if it's a new school year. For instance, if we've got the IEP from this current year and we just wrote one for the following year, that goes in a new binder. That goes into 2014-15, let's say. So you're creating your system to keep rolling forward. And then if you have your IEP amended for this current academic year, that goes in this year's binder. And you're going to put the amendment on top, because that's going to have the new information on it. Then I would encourage you to check that master list. Let's say you got something very pertinent from the school, like an assessment that's going to change your reevaluation date, for instance. Make that on your master list and say, evaluation for speech and language, this date. Now you'll know where to find it. It's in this binder. So you're not searching through 3 years of binders to find it, because your reevals go every 3 years, remember. So things like that are important. This is why I say have a master list. How are we doing on time? Okay, thank you. We got a little bit of time. We are going to take a break in a little bit. Okay, we'll get to the end of this slide. Excellent. So I encourage you to keep tabs on your child's progress. And some people do what's called a running record. It's a little bit different than the documentation I was telling you about a moment ago. It's kind of a narrative. You're keeping a record of everything that's happened in that year as a summary. Okay, we met, you just kind of have a date, and then you say what happened, what's going to happen, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. And then at the bottom, you might want to say, this was the outcome for this academic year. This is what we're wanting to do for next year. That's what I call a running record. It's a summary report, if you will. So kind of think about that. That sounds like a lot of work. I know it does. But it will keep you completely ahead of the game when you are in those meetings, planning for next year, finding your records. You will never face that anxiety again of, oh, I don't really know what to do, or I'm just going to have to trust them with that record. You are now in control of the information